The federal government is playing hardball after two automakers dropped some Canadian car production. CBC News has learned it's limiting the number of tariff-free vehicles they can import from the United States to sell here in Canada. The CBC's Ashley Burke broke this story and joins us now. Ashley, this is a big story. What have you learned?
Well, the federal government is firing back at both Stellantis and GM. And as you mentioned, what they're going to be doing is limiting the number of cars that are assembled in the U.S. that they can import to Canada tariff-free. So they don't have a bill, a counter-tariff essentially, that Canada's put in place. So Canada had given them an exemption so that when they're bringing these vehicles in, they didn't have to pay the retaliatory tariff that Canada had hit on the U.S. That's a 25% tariff. It would have been a big bill for them. And they had exemptions. There was a certain number of vehicles that they could bring into the country without paying that. Now, after Stellantis announced last week that it was going to be moving some of its production, its Jeep Compass production from its Brampton, Ontario plant to Illinois, and as well, GM announced that it's going to be stopping and scrapping some EV production in its Ingersoll, Ontario plant. The government is saying, look, you can't have this benefit anymore. And there was a condition in place when they offered this to car companies that they had to keep its full Canadian footprint, so it's all of its production that it promised, and also all of its investments that it had promised in this country. And sources tell me that the federal government believes that both of these companies have not lived up to this promise. So until they do, they are not going to be getting this benefit. And we also learned that they're going to be reducing Stellantis's, it's called an annual remission quota, by 50% and GM by 24%. So that's the impact that they're facing right now.
You sort of laid out the various sort of parts to this, and there's a lot that are sort of competing for attention. Why this move and why now, I think more specifically?
Well, this is a move. It appears to put pressure on both of these companies to keep their production in Canada, to keep these jobs for workers. We've heard the industry minister, Melanie Joly, be very clear that she was disappointed in Stellantis. She called it unacceptable, and she said she was going to put maximum pressure on them. She threatened to sue them. We also learned that the federal government gave them $105 million to retool that Brampton, Ontario plant and its Windsor plant for production. And the government feels that after giving them this money, they didn't live up to their promise. The condition was they had to keep that plant going. So it's a pressure move there. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford also said they would sue GM if they didn't live up to what they committed to. And we heard the Prime Minister today too weigh in, saying that he spoke to GM, that they have said that they will pay their workers like they have to and live up to that obligation. But he said it's not enough, that he's not satisfied. They're looking for ways to try to keep that plant, that GM plant in Ingersoll, open and to potentially even use it as part of their defense industrial strategy. So that's a way they're trying to boost defense production and procurement here in Canada. But all of this really appears to be a move to put pressure on them to not drain production out of Canada to the U.S.
We'll see if it works. Ashley, thanks for this. Good work. The CBC's Ashley Burke. Here with more on reaction to this news, we have Flavio Volpe, the president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, and here with me in studios, Lana Payne, the Unifor national president. Flavio, if I can start with you, what impact do you think this will actually have on the auto industry itself?
Look, those remissions are in place for American exports into Canada. Canada is the biggest export market for the American car industry. And what we had done earlier on in the year is to say, look, we're going to soften the blow to keep these companies manufacturing here in Canada. That's buying parts to build cars and employing auto workers and auto suppliers workers. We're going to let you off the counter tariff. So if that means that they're removing the remissions on 100,000 imports into this country, those imports are probably worth $5 billion in total. That's a $1.25 billion tariff hit for abandoning the promise of the manufacturing of those vehicles in places like Brampton, where that company had been there since 1962, and places like Ingersoll, where that company had been doing that since 1989. I think Canadians and the industry want the governments to be tough on companies that don't own up to those partnerships that in many cases have been worth billions. And this is a great move.
Your union was among those calling for this exact measure. Why this, as opposed to, like, there's a whole bunch of things they could have done. Why does this, the changing of the remissions and essentially tariffing these jobs, but not exactly doing that, why this exact move?
Because it's a carrot-stick approach, and this actually, I think, will work. It's why our union proposed a remission plan, that if you're going to build in Canada, you won't face a tariff. We are in a trade war. It's all about tariffs. And but if you're going to change that, then your exemption is going to change. Right. And honestly, Donald Trump is playing hardball right now. He's extorting corporations. He's doing everything he can to surgically destroy our industrial economy in Canada, including the auto industry in that. And if we don't push back hard against him and against these companies, we're going to lose it all.
This basically matches what Donald Trump has said. If the American car companies make cars in America, they don't have to pay the tariffs. This is slightly different, but essentially the same message. Have I got that right? Yeah,
what we're saying is that Canada is a very important market to U.S. automakers. Extremely important. It's the most important market they have outside of the United States. But if you're going to not build here and you're not going to live up to your commitments to working people, you're not going to have unfair access to the Canadian market. And that's basically where we are today.
Flavio, you've been in the room with Donald Trump through various parts of these negotiations, going back to the first term with Donald Trump. How do you think the U.S. administration, the USTR, the various players in this are going to react to a move like this?
I don't think they're going to have the reaction that you might be worried about. I think the reaction that's going to be important here is in Detroit. Detroit has, in those two cases, they've bowed to pressure from the White House, and we've said, "Hey, listen, we understand that he's disruptive and that there's a bully in the White House, but we're not pushovers either." When companies make commitments and then they kick off suppliers to make hundreds of millions of dollars of commitments to back up their production decisions, and they walk away, and never mind that it's disrespectful. It's companies, families, workers make commitments for their livelihoods, and Canada is not an insignificant player in this. And if we have to use the full power of the federal and provincial government, we should, because we asked for the full power of the federal and provincial government to secure these investments. I think Donald Trump knows, and his administration knows, that they're playing hardball, and there's a lot of other trading partners that have responded in kind with their domestic industrial policy. All is fair in love and war, even if it's a trade war.
I want to get to the bigger picture of where we're at with the auto industry right now. You, the union, combined with Polara today, have a survey out that suggests a couple of key things. One is that 79% of Canadians surveyed say they were concerned about the auto industry's future. 74% agree that an auto sector collapse would have a, quote, devastating impact on the Canadian economy. And 70% feel Canada should not sacrifice the auto sector to get a good deal with the U.S. I wonder, when you saw that research come in, how do you think that factors into what we're seeing out of the news today and where we're at in the broader picture of the auto industry?
I think Canadians are really smart, and they're with us here because we have been saying this for many months right now, that the auto industry, the industrial economy of Canada is at risk because of these tariffs. And honestly, of course they understand that the industry is at risk. Look what we've just experienced in the last week. It's a bloodbath out there. We're losing jobs basically every single day. The automakers are some of them, but the reality is it's the tariffs that are driving a lot of this. We just had an announcement in Quebec yesterday at PACCAR, a heavy-duty truck production facility. It's every day right now. And that's why it's so critically important that in our negotiations with the United States in this moment, that auto and heavy-duty trucks and manufacturing are part of an entire package of how we get these tariffs lifted and using the leverage that we have around important things that the United States needs in order for their industrial economy to work. And I hope that we can get there, but right now it's very, very concerning.
You know, we have leverage. Canadians have leverage. And Flavio, you and I have talked about this so many times in the past that one of the parts of this survey found that 67% of Canadians would boycott or consider a boycott of a company that moves their operations from Canada to the U.S. How much do you think Canadians really understand about how many cars are made here in Canada? Which of those cars that Canadians buy are Canadian? We have been largely blind to where North American cars are made because we've bought into this system that benefited the entire auto industry. Do you think we need to do a better job of making sure Canadians understand where the cars they're buying are actually manufactured?
Well, I think the poll says that Canadians care enough to direct their purchasing dollars in places that benefit Canadians, especially if the source for those products is adversarial to us. No, I don't think Canadians go to the dealership and look for a number 2 as the second digit in the VIN to say, hey, by the way, that's Canadian. But I think Canadians know that companies like Toyota and Honda and Ford are committed to this country and commit to communities, and they feel comfortable there. I think everybody knows that Tesla is not one of those companies, just to use an example, that has committed to manufacturing and sourcing in Canada. And given what we've learned over the last year or so, we've seen their sales in this country suffer. What Canadians are saying in that survey is that they understand that there are massive spin-off benefits of being in an advanced manufacturing economy. You know, a vehicle is a $50,000 product. It has technology in it at the material sciences point of view to algorithms and self-drive. It helps to bring to bear all the different things that we hope our kids will learn and go out and earn a living in. One thing that I think is hopefully clear here, especially as you see me and Lana on the screen together, labor and suppliers who employ 75% of the employment in this country are on the same page here. We are absolutely speaking with one voice, and we are, in our case, the suppliers of the Canadian companies, and we're committed to that long-term future, and we're committed to doing that hand in hand with the labor movement, who is on the front line and always has been, but is being very thoughtful, of course, in how do we keep this as a Canadian legacy, as Canadian opportunities into the next generations.
Really quick last question to you. Do you think this stops the bleeding? Do you think this affects some real immediate change? Like what impact does this have in the very short term?
I mean, we have their attention now, which is very, very good. And we have to realize what Canadians are telling us is that, you know, we don't want to just be a country that digs it and ships it. We also want to build things here, and we want to build smart things, and they understand the importance of it, because that poll tells us that they care about the auto industry, they care about the steel industry, the aluminum industry, the forest industry. They care about the fact that we should be a country that builds as well.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. I have great thanks to both of you for making this, especially on such short notice. Thank you to Lana Payne and Flavio Volpe.